evil wear disguises on the margins. There are monsters and there are messiahs, but which is which and who is who? I do not know what possessed me to try to tell this Genesis tale in vacation Bible school. I was young and stupid, I suppose. I also had the perfect care for this story. Mr. Dills and Tommy. Now, Mr. Dills was the Sunday school superintendent, as old as God, the kids said, and I almost believed them. And Tommy was the terror of the long-suffering volunteer staff. If you said walk, he ran. If you said sit down, he bounced higher. Take a nap, he ran circles around everyone. 5 going on infinity. A fascinating age. So, since he was acting out, I thought we could put it to good use. Act out a story. Let him run around for a purpose. Make it a narrative. And we needed a hard story and a scary story. And once upon a time, an old man and a young boy went up a mountain. See? Oh, we worked out the basic plot line. There, Mr. Dills and Tommy and I sitting in this sanctuary where it was chilly like this, working out what we would do. I would read the story. That's all I'm going to need to do, read the story. And we sat there facing this big altar table that was under a great cross. And I'd read the story, and they'd walk down the aisle, and Mr. Dills would kneel down and pretend to tie Tommy's hands together, and Tommy would promise to stand very still. And Mr. Dills would then pick him up and lay him on the altar. And then we'd all close our eyes, and I'd say a prayer. And when we'd open our eyes, Mr. Dills would be holding Tommy in his arms. What was I thinking? I know what Tommy thought when I first told him the story that he had obviously missed in his energetic participation. And I explained, you know, about what this laying on the altar meant in the story that's in the Bible. And so I said, Tommy, what would you do if you thought God had told your father to do something bad to you? And Tommy said, call the police. God bless the healthy ego. That was the right answer. Would it be true? Should it? Could it one day be true in all places? There ought to be a law. But we went through it, that God didn't really, you know, mean that. Didn't really mean that, but you see, you know, there was this cross. So, came the day, everybody gathered. They did just as they were scripted. Walked into the sanctuary. Tommy had a good time going up and down the aisle, pretending to pick up sticks. Came to the front. Mr. Dills knelt down. Tommy came over, expectant. And then we got stuck. Because Mr. Dills, kneeling there, looked at me and said, I can't do this again. That's not in the script. What did he mean again? Again, what did he mean? And he said, not again. I can't do this again. And then I remembered what I should have never forgotten. In the rush of all the new information in a new parish, you forget things. But what I should have never forgotten was that he had a son late in life. And when the boy turned 18, he volunteered for Vietnam. It was his family's, his father's tradition. It went 4 generations back. The eldest boy serving in the military. But you see, this is the first time the eldest was the only. So he had to have his father's permission. And he received it. And he volunteered. And he never came home again. I should have remembered. I should have remembered why he might have served for generations as a Sunday school superintendent, why he always stood at the door to welcome the children, why he always had candy to comfort the tearful, and why he received their little confidences with such care. I should have remembered. We sailed off the map. We were bounding in uncharted waters. He was on one knee, Tommy looking at him, an empty altar and a terrifying text putting him deeper and us deeper and deeper, and he keeps shaking his head and saying, "Not again." And then Tommy did the unthinkable. It came naturally. He offered his hands to be tied. And he nudged the old man as if he thought he'd forgotten what comes next. He offered his hands to be tied. And maybe he did it because he thought he didn't remember what came next, or maybe he thought that Mr. Dills couldn't do it without his help. Or maybe he thought we needed him to help us to get to the end of the story. He offered his hands to be tied. And Mr. Dills gathered him up and held him hard and turned to face the empty table. He stood for just a moment looking at the cross. And then he looked at me. And then he made a sharp turn and walked right down the aisle and out the door. And we were spellbound in silence. And we stayed that way for a long time until we heard Tommy laughing and the sound of the swing. I don't know where that leaves us. We're on the margins. After 30 years, I'm still haunted by this gesture of agency, this willingness to get to the heart of the story. I'm haunted by the fear that sometimes what we think we've heard God say is a monstrous delusion, and the young have followed us into that nightmare in such trust. And sometimes the sound of a child laughing reminds me I can stand at the table like this. Christ has died.